Hello again, everybody. This is Steve coming to you with another lesson in writing. This time it's about lost knowledge and texts. Now, this is something that tends to be more in the fantasy realm than it does in the sci-fi realm, but it does exist in both realms. The basics of this is that over time, knowledge is lost. That's just a fact of life. If you look back in antiquity, there was the Library of Alexandria. That was destroyed by the Muslim invasions. Or when the Muslims invaded through there, they destroyed the Library of Alexandria. There was a lot lost there. When Rome fell, there was a lot of knowledge lost there. Like when the Persian and Babylonian empires fell, there was a lot of lost information and knowledge there. And it doesn't have to just be like a fall of empires. One of the things we have at work is what we call tribal knowledge, which that may I may work in the tech field, and that's how we call or what we call it. Tribal knowledge basically being stuff that people know, but isn't written down. So when they leave, they take that knowledge with them, and that knowledge is lost. But that's true, really, of a lot of things. You could have somebody who's a master chef, and he has all these recipes memorized, and when he leaves, he takes all of that knowledge with him, and suddenly there's this great big brain drain. Same thing happens when people die. They take information with them. Speaking of chefs, there's one from 1800s, might be early 1900s. Escoffier. He worked in the culinary field. And one thing about him is he worked in an environment where tribal knowledge was huge. And interestingly enough, he took that tribal knowledge and wrote it down, which was very smart, because then that information was preserved. There is a lot of stuff that happened like in the olden days, which is part of why the Roman Empire lost what it did, along with some other empires, is you have like the old guilds. You have the Magicians Guild, you have the Stonecrafters Guild, the Masons Guild, the Leathermakers Guild, etc., etc. That information was lost when those guilds collapsed. In a sci-fi environment, you could this even works in a fantasy environment, works in antiquity. Is the idea that some information is classified, or we call it classified. They just called it secret. It was information that was kept secret. It was destroyed when it was no longer needed or in danger of being discovered. Information that was hidden and never recovered. So that's something that is going to be true in any world that you work on. Doesn't matter if it's sci-fi, doesn't matter if it's fantasy. Lost knowledge, lost texts is going to be a big thing, which also creates a very useful story plot or story element where suddenly you have these people that stumble across this lost ancient text, which is full of lost knowledge, and they discover it, and all of a sudden, this opens doors to things that weren't there before. Let's just say, like, just use a modern example. Let's say something that's likely to happen. I'll throw this out. Let's just say the sun decides to burp, get indigestion and burps out this great big CME, which is a coronal mass ejection. Coronal mass ejection hits the Earth, and it literally just EMPs, or electromagnetic pulse. It just EMPs everything, fries all of our electronics. Suddenly, no power, no running water, no nothing. We're suddenly living like the Amish, or we're living like the people in the 1850s. I think it would probably go back to 1850s technology, and I've had some other people I've talked to that said, yeah, we won't go back to like the 1600s, 1700s necessarily, but we might. But more than likely, we'll go back to kind of at 1800s living, somewhere like 1830s to 1850s. And there's going to be a big die-off of people when that happens, because there's a lot of people nowadays that can't live in that type of environment because they don't have the skills anymore. Those skills are lost skills because they aren't needed anymore. But suddenly the whole world gets CME'd into oblivion, and 90% of the world population will die off, and the other 10% will then have to figure out how to survive. Some will already have that knowledge. They've preserved it, they've learned it, stuff like that. A lot of other people will learn it as they go along, but as far as the higher end technology, that's just going to get wiped out. And one of the things with apocalyptic situations like that is, and I think Stephen King's The Stand does a good job of portraying this, although I've seen it in others, like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and stuff like that. Some things from the modern world will survive. They had a sci-fi, I can't remember the name of it, but it was from a number of years ago. The basic premise was that they released a type of advanced nanite onto the planet that would literally suck up all the electricity. And that kind of worked almost the same idea as an EMP. Literally nothing electrical worked. And suddenly everybody was driven back into the 1800s. Now they had like steam engines that were in museums. They managed to recover those. They managed to get those working again. They had muskets and rifles. They had some modern rifles. The problem was, at the beginning they had all these modern munitions. They had RPGs. They had anything that was not affected by electricity. Now, considering an RPG is a piezoelectric, it might not work in that environment. They didn't say if it would or not, but it might not. So, some of the weapons might work, some of them might not. If they're entirely, not electrochemical, they're mechanical and chemical is what I'm thinking here, but there's another word for it. But basically, if it can't function entirely mechanically and you can't have like physical action results and chemical reaction or something like that does not involve electricity, nothing would work in that environment. Now, there was a problem with that story, and I don't think the writers picked up on it, but one of the things that they failed to cover was the fact that if these nanites are killing off all the electronic devices by dampening their power or dampening the electrical interactions of those devices, that system's going to kill humans too, because we're electrochemical. So it would kill your electronic devices, but it would kill you too, because all of a sudden your whole body's just going to shut down because the nervous system couldn't function anymore. And if those nanites got into your body, you're dying. That's all there is to it. That was a huge plot hole on their part. But people kind of like the show, so I guess they just looked past that and stuff. But anyways, thinking about that too that's little details you need to think about when you're working with your story, especially with loss of knowledge, loss of texts, stuff like that. One other thing you got to consider too, if you do like a societal collapse type thing, there will be not an immediate loss of knowledge. There will be an immediate loss, but not a total loss. You're not also not going to have a complete and total loss of technology. Going back to Stephen King's The Stand, as the brain drain happened, then you saw the gradual decay of the society. Power went off, water went off. Suddenly, you're down to oil and battery-powered lamps. Well, eventually the battery lamps ran out, or the batteries wore out if they were rechargeable and you had a way to recharge them. And I don't think Stephen King did a good job of this. I've actually role-played it just for my own interest. One of the things, though, that when that societal collapse happens, again, you're going to have a lot of people dying off. In his, it was because of a plague. A military-engineered biological weapon that got loose. And some people were immune to it, some people weren't. Those that weren't died off, those that were lived on, but they had the problem with failing infrastructure. You have the initial failure, which if you've ever watched the series Life After People, I think it is, or Life After Humans. I think it's Life After People. It shows just how fast society and the world around us decays as soon as you take humans out of the picture. Stephen King's portrayal of it was that fall was a little bit slower. It wasn't as immediate as like Life After People. In reality, you're not going to have the rug pulled out from underneath you and suddenly everything's going to come to a dead, absolute halt. You're going to have, that gradual loss of modernity. You're going to have that gradual loss of knowledge of people. Going back to that one about the nanites that were creating kind of an artificial EMP, and when they turned them off, all the power came back magically. Which is again incorrect, but just for humor's sake, you're going to have modern weapons. You're going to have modern technology. Vehicles will still run. You're still going to have gas. Now, gas will decay over a period. Eventually, you're going to go to the point where your gasoline cars will not work because gas will only survive about 6 months. And then it degrades to the point where the car just doesn't run, or if it runs, it's like, it's running really horribly because the octane decays in it. That and the materials themselves have a decay in them. I don't know the exact physics of it, but it will. It's kind of like it spoils in a sense. That's why you have products like Stable and Prig and Prid. And I say Prig and Prid. It's basically PRI gas and PRI diesel. One thing that you will find with fuel, which is interesting, is as gasoline decays and it loses its octane, and it doesn't work in a gasoline engine, that same gasoline will work in a diesel engine. The problem with that then becomes, you can switch all of your vehicles from gasoline to diesel, and that decaying gasoline will work fine. And you can to save your diesel, which will decay too. To save your diesel, you run your diesel engines on gasoline, which there's a minor problem with that. It's lubricity. Diesel fuel actually helps lubricate the engine, so you're basically, if you start running it on gasoline and kerosene, you're going to start wearing your engines out faster. But at the same time, you're also needing to minimize or slow down your decay, because your society is going to decay. And that, and again, this is still under the whole lost knowledge and text thing, because this is all relevant to that. You're going to start getting to the point where, like I said, you can't run gasoline engines anymore. So you take any of those vehicles and equipment and stuff, throw that to the side. You go to your diesels. Well, your diesels, if to try to preserve fuel, you're running gasoline and kerosene through them. You could throw like diesel oil into that fuel to get the equivalent lubricity, but the other problem is you don't have any factories producing diesel oil anymore. You're gonna slowly run out of diesel oil. You're gonna run out of filters, parts, things like this. So if you're making a story about some kind of big apocalyptic event, like the book 1 Second After, like I say, you need to understand that you will have some technology that will survive the initial fall, and you will have people will survive the initial fall, unless it's something completely apocalyptic and billions die in one shot. But if it's a normal decay, you're going to have societal decay. You're going to have knowledge loss, because the people who have the knowledge to maintain that higher level of the higher standard of living are also the same guys that are usually going to die off early. So, and the ones that don't have that knowledge but do have the survival and long-term knowledge are the guys that are going to hang around for a lot longer, and they're going to be the guys that are going to help you keep from hitting rock bottom. So, you may lose all that knowledge on how to create cars and gasoline and weapons and stuff like that, and you might go back to making muzzle-loading muskets. Now, I don't think you're going to go back, if it was a real-world situation, I don't think you're going to go back that far. But also, depending on how it decays, you might find yourself back to sticks and stones and homemade bows and stuff like that before you start swinging up the other side. Loss of knowledge also happens through deprecation. Things, like, okay, we've got, let's just say, let's go into my own field, technology and information systems. Just look at how far we've come in 20 years with computers. I mean, we used to have computers that were running, 20 years ago, or even 30 years ago, we were running like Windows 3.1, Windows 95, DOS, stuff like that. Now we've got, DOS, Linux, Mac OS, or not DOS, but we've got Windows, Linux, Mac OS, we've got Symbian, we've got Android, and all these different operating systems. We've got this high-end hardware. There's more horsepower and processing power in your wristwatch than there was on the Apollo missions, and even in your calculator, really. Especially your graphing calculators, those would run circles around what the Apollo mission had. So you got old, like the space shuttle, for example. The space shuttles ran on 486 processors. Nowadays, we got them, like what you have with Elon Musk, we got them running high-end Intel and AMD chips. So there's a loss of knowledge, but sometimes that loss of knowledge is a good thing because the old system is deprecated, so the new system comes in. The only bad part about that is if the old system is eventually needed for any particular reason, that knowledge is now lost, so you can't go back to it. Falling into the fantasy tropes and stories and stuff like this, one big trope that, it's been used a lot, but it also reflects real life, is that there are certain things where things were more powerful, they were better, they were bigger in the old days versus now. And I've seen a lot of different stories where like in quote-unquote ancient times, you had these giants running around, and they had all of these super powerful wizards and super powerful spells. And that's even been a big trope in isekais, where they talk about all this lost knowledge, ancient knowledge. The Eighth Sun anime, that one is a big one on lost knowledge. There's a lot of it in I'm a Spider, So What? That one, you can see that there is a lot of lost knowledge. Some of it's preserved, a lot of it's lost. I think Lord of the Rings even had some of those type of like ancient texts that were lost. Taking Lord of the Rings, for example, the elves, eventually left Middle Earth. Well, okay. When they left Middle Earth, there was a great big brain drain because they took a lot of information with them. Fires, natural disasters, those can cause that. Like they can wipe out things that that once were there and aren't there anymore. Earthquakes are a good one for that. And that can be done either by the earthquake killing the person, or so shaking up the society that information is lost. If I'm remembering my history correctly, I think like Aristotle had a lot of useful information in his time, but some ignorant soldier came in, and when Aristotle told him off, the guy, and I'm thinking it's Aristotle, it might be somebody different, but I think it was him. The soldier just walked over there and killed him off, and it's like, whoop, there goes that knowledge. So, yeah. Anyways, as I was saying though, this is going to be stuff that will impact your story. It's probably going to be more applicable to fantasy than sci-fi, but there is stuff in sci-fi that's a big thing. Like I say, You could look at, well, again, going back to anime, and going back to like I'm a Spider, So What, or Eighth Son, or some of the other ones like that, or Make Me Average in the Next Life. A couple of those like that, where that knowledge was there at one time, but then something happened and the society fell. And the technology is still there, that knowledge is still there, it's just lost to the normal person. And a normal person is no longer advanced enough or intellectual enough or educated enough, really, to make use of that. Because, like in Eighth Son, they talk about all these ancient artifacts, and they're not ancient artifacts, they're pieces of lost technology. Stuff that used to be a big thing. There is some theories that the Aztecs and some of the ancient societies of Earth even had like really advanced technology, even to the point that they say that Atlantis might not actually be as much of a fable as a lot of people think, that it might have actually been a real thing, but an earthquake or something that they did wrong destroyed their society and took all of that ancient knowledge with them. So again, that's, like I said, that's going to be something you can use in your books, in your stories, that can be impactful, like Revelations. Like one book I'm working on, this is a good example of lost knowledge. I shouldn't say it's a book, it's a series I'm working on, but the first book is going to be the primary focus of where this comes from. In the book, at least in the idea, is the way it stands. Everybody in the galaxy lives under this empire. Everybody thinks the empire's great. They think it's wonderful, even though it's despotic. They think it's great. They're kind of brainwashed, not realizing that. And the other thing too is, the planet that they think is Earth is not actually Earth. There's a different planet that seems, it's nobody wants anything to do with it. It's backwater. Who wants that planet? If some people want to colonize it, that's fine. We don't want it. This is Earth. This is what we want. Not realizing that they brainwashed everybody and rewrote memories and made everybody think that this other planet was Earth, but that other planet, and then that the other planet, or the Earth was the other planet and the other planet was Earth. Basically, they swapped them. Well, there's some of that knowledge that was stored for safekeeping by people who kind of rebelled against the empire, and they didn't go for the brainwashing, or they weren't able to be brainwashed, and they were hidden or protected or whatever, and that knowledge was preserved on the planet and hidden there. And the MC eventually is driven there as an outcast. They want to get rid of him because he's starting to find out too many things are becoming a problem for the empire. So they want to shovel him off to this planet where they can just get rid of him. Well, they actually want to kill him. But when they can't kill him, they want to just kind of throw him somewhere that he can't be a problem anymore. And he eventually finds this hidden knowledge and the reality that, no, this planet isn't Earth, and that Earth isn't this planet. And that then brings in the events of Book 2 and Book 3. But anyways, that's one application I have for that lost knowledge. Another good example of it, that just even from my own writing, is Land of the Lions, Book 3, Lion on the Water. That the reader discovers it first, but then the main characters discover it after the fact that, hey, we're not originally from this planet. We've got a history going back a lot farther than this planet, and we come from this other race, this other society. We come from the Commonwealth, and we didn't used to live here. Our ancestors came here to escape the Commonwealth. So that is, a loss of knowledge that is eventually regained, including the technology of the Commonwealth and the Abernai and stuff like that. So, like I say, this kind of element here is very, very useful in writing. I've hopefully given you guys enough examples to kind of spark your creativity. And if you want to read other people who do apocalyptic novels, they do like that show. I wish I could remember the show. All I remember is that it was basically it ran for like 2 seasons, I think. And the first season was how, well, it was basically everything got shut down by these rogue nanites, and you know, that basically where everybody landed, how they survived, and so forth like that. Stephen King's The Stand is a good one to read for that aspect. I'm trying to think of some other good ones. Oh, here's an interesting one. Pern. Now, not all the Pern novels. There is a Pern novel in... Forgive me, I'm bad with names. I can picture it. But there's 2 of them. There's one where the people of Pern discover the technology of their ancestors, who originally came there from the autocracy that it wasn't an autocracy, it was a technocracy, I think it was. Basically, it was a bunch of oligarchs running this high-tech society, and they didn't want anything to do with the society, so they moved to Pern and set up life there. And part of what they did while they were there was they shed their technology. That was one of the things they wanted. They wanted to go to kind of a medieval fiefdom type setup. So that was a intentional downgrading and loss of knowledge, which was later recovered. And then there's another one that actually covers the colonization of Pern and that stepping down of technology. So you get to see it from the, okay, this has been lost for a while, now we're recovering it, and you get to see it from here, we're coming from this technology to this medieval fiefdom system. So both of those are good ones. I'm trying to think of 1 Second After is a good one, because that gives you a little more modern viewpoint on it. There is another one. Actually, there's quite a few of them. Mad Max is kind of okay. I don't think it's really a great one for ideas, but it's one you could look into if that's kind of what you're into. Go study history. The fall of the Roman Empire, the fall of the Greek Empire, the fall of the rise and fall of Persia. China went through a lot of rises and falls. Then you have what's another good example? The fall of Europe in the Middle Ages, kind of the aftermath of the fall of the Roman Empire. Ottoman Empire is a good one. Some of the European empires are good ones. There's other ones like in the Americas. There's the Aztec. There's the various Native American cultures. Rise and fall of them. So that's a good source for information. And with this one, it's going to be a lot of research, finding what you think works best for your specific situation. But as I stated before, you also have to consider if you're doing something that's a societal fall, your fall is unless it's some major cataclysm, your fall is going to be gradual. But as it goes downhill, it'll pick up speed. And your goal, as you go down that hill, you realize you can't maintain your standard of living in your previous lifestyle. It's going to keep degrading. It depends on what you do and how you do it, or for that matter, your characters, as to what you're going to be able to maintain and how much of it. And that's going to depend a lot on infrastructure. It's going to depend on knowledge, what knowledge is retained, what knowledge is lost. And things like that. And like with a societal fall, you're going to want to go down, and the end goal of the guys operating, or the characters operating within this fall, is going to be, where is the point where we're going to start leveling out? Where are we going? Are we going to face plant into the ground and create a glorious crater and go out in a blaze of glory, or are we going to find ways to adapt and eventually kind of pull us out of our nosedive and start, at least get on the level, and then start climbing back up, regaining lost technology, regaining lost knowledge, things like that. And again, some of that lost knowledge will eventually find its way back into the society, either through experimentation, lost texts that are discovered, things like that, and you're going to start climbing back the other side. So anyways, I'm at 30 minutes. I'm trying to keep these under 30 minutes if I can, because I know I got a little long on my introductions to my different worlds and stuff. So I try to keep these under 30 minutes because there's a lot of knowledge to be relayed in all of this. Like I say, I've got like 32 years of knowledge, 32 years of experience. And it's just different things that I know I've run into, stuff that I'm sure would be useful for you in those various situations. And I try to share what I've learned so that you can learn from me and pass on that knowledge. We don't get information loss from lack of sharing. That's why we have schools to teach people the things we've already learned. So anyways, I'll leave it at that, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.